Good evening and welcome to this live telephone town hall meeting. Right now we're dialing out to thousands of homes in the 7th Congressional District of New Jersey. On this telephone town hall tonight, you can ask questions, share concerns, and get updates on the latest from Congress. Congressman Tom Malinowski will be joining us in just a moment, but first I want to tell you how you can participate in tonight's telephone town hall meeting. Simply press 0 on your keypad if you have a question at any time. Hit 0 on your keypad if you have a question. From there, you'll be sent to one of our operators who will assist you in asking your question live on the air to Congressman Malinowski. If you have a question but you prefer not to go live on the air, just let your operator know and I can read the question for you, whatever's most comfortable for you. I also want to encourage you to press 7 on your keypad. Get the most out of this call by pressing 7 on your keypad at any time. And there you can submit your email address to get the very latest from Congressman Malinowski's office. He's going to keep you updated on many things going on in Washington, D.C., so please hit 7 on your keypad during this call. We have a lot of folks already on the call, and we've had some new friends join us, so I'm going to repeat just part of this message before I turn the call over to your Congressman, Tom Malinowski. But on this live telephone town hall tonight, you can ask questions, share your concerns, and get updates on the latest from Congress. Congressman Tom Malinowski is right here and he's ready to go. I just want to let you know two things before he begins the call. One is that if you press 0 on your keypad, whenever you have a question, you'll be sent to one of our operators who will assist you in asking your question live on the air of Congressman Malinowski. If you prefer not to go live on the air, just let your operator know and we can read the question for you. Most importantly, we want you to press 7 at any time on your keypad to submit your email address so you can get the very latest from the Congressman's office. Hit 7 on your keypad at any point throughout the call. With that, we have a great audience, and we'll turn the call over to your Congressman, Tom Malinowski, who will take the call from here. Go ahead, Congressman.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us tonight. I am going to just start off by saying a few words about some of the work that I've been doing, offer you a few thoughts to get our conversation going, and then I really look forward to getting your questions and comments. The last few months, we've all had, I think, the same overriding priority, and that's been to get through this coronavirus crisis. And my overriding priority in Congress has been to make sure that we're doing what we can to help people who've been hurt, to help keep our economy on life support through the most difficult stages of the epidemic, all with a goal of buying time so that our national leadership and our states can get the pandemic under control and we can start getting back to normal. I'm sure you know some of the highlights of what Congress has done. The main bill that we passed that went to the president that he signed and that has touched, I think, all of our lives is the CARES Act. That authorized the stimulus checks that went out to a lot of people, the very generous unemployment benefits that we've provided, because after all, we were asking people to not work and we wanted to make sure that they were taken care of. And the Paycheck Protection Program, the forgivable loans for our small businesses to try to make sure that they could keep their employees on payroll. We put that program into place, then we had to fix it a couple of times. I worked really, really hard to try to make sure that the money was actually going to our genuinely small businesses in our communities. My team has been working night and day these last few weeks to try to make sure that everybody who is entitled to help got that help. And just this week, we got the transparency report because Congress required the administration to tell us who got that money. And the good news is that 15,000 businesses in our congressional district got help under the Paycheck Protection Program, 15,000 supporting around 135,000 jobs. That program literally saved our economy over the last few weeks. The question is, how did we use that time, because all of this was supposed to buy us time to get the epidemic under control. Well, the answer, I think, to that question is that in New Jersey, we did what we had to do. We made tough decisions. We got testing and contact tracing ramped up. All of us took part. We all practiced social distancing. We all made sacrifices, and we made progress. Our numbers are way, way down compared to the rest of the country. If all of the country was New Jersey, America would be okay right now. But unfortunately, all of the country is not New Jersey. We had messages coming from our highest national leadership that downplayed the severity of this crisis, calling on states to liberate themselves from the lockdowns. We had states outside of New Jersey that opened up too early before they even made a serious effort to get this under control. And we all see what's happening now in Texas and in Florida and in Georgia and in Oklahoma and in other states. And we know we're not an island in New Jersey. We know we are not immune. I got to tell you, I'm not happy about this. I'm pretty angry. We spent $2 trillion of your money, of taxpayers' money, to make sure we could use this time wisely, and not everybody used it wisely. We have now people in Washington trying to order states to reopen schools, trying to hold up aid to states. This is coming from the White House, to try to force us to open up when what we need is help to enable us to open up safely. That's what I'm focused on. That's what the Congress has been focused on. So what do we have to do next? We do need more COVID relief legislation. The House of Representatives passed the HEROES Act. I strongly supported that. We are now negotiating with Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader. Finally, he's acknowledged that we are going to need another bill, and we will hopefully work that out and send something to the president by the end of this month. My number one priority in that effort is to try to get relief for our state, our county, and our municipal governments. I had a bill in the House, bipartisan, that would do that, that would make sure every single municipality in our congressional district gets help. That's essential because every single service we depend on, from our schools to our public works to our cops and firefighters, is going to be in trouble if we don't get that help, because revenues to state and local governments are way, way down. So that's my number one priority over the next 2 or 3 weeks. Now, there's a lot more going on we can talk about. We passed an infrastructure bill in the House a couple of weeks ago. There's a lot in there for the Gateway project, for our roads, our bridges, our railways in New Jersey. Good news, we've already got the money for the Portal Bridge, which is the first stage of the Gateway project. I fought really hard for that. We have police reform legislation. We've been passing bills the last couple of weeks to shore up the Affordable Care Act in the House of Representatives. I continue my work as a member of the Foreign Relations Committee as well to try to make sure that our country and our troops are safe around the world. I co-chaired a hearing just yesterday on this terrible story about Russian bounties being placed on the heads of our troops. That's another thing that we can talk about. But I am very eager to hear your questions on anything that is on your mind, anything that you think is important right now. And so why don't we go to our audience and get the first question. Thank you again so much for participating.
Thank you very much, Congressman. Folks, if you've joined us in the last few minutes, we want to welcome you to this live telephone town hall with your Congressman, Tom Malinowski. We're taking your questions live here. Just hit 0 on the keypad if you have a question. And most importantly, we want you to hit 7 on your keypad to submit your email address. There's a lot of things going on, and Congressman Malinowski and his office are going to keep you up to date through email if you press 7. We have operators standing by who are ready to help you with that, so just hit 7 on your keypad now. Our first question comes from Eileen in Branchburg. Eileen, go ahead with your question, please.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. My fiance was unemployed during the COVID period for 12 weeks. He has gotten all of his basic payments, but he's only gotten two $600 supplemental payments. And he's already back to work, and he hasn't received anything other than those two payments. So who is responsible for sending those payments or monitoring them? Because, I mean, they owe him like 10 of them.
Thanks for the question. So the supplemental $600 payments, that's what we enacted in the CARES Act, which I mentioned. And he should have received them if he qualified, which I take it he did, from the moment that he applied for unemployment. So if the period of time that he was unemployed, the period of time between when he applied for benefits and when he resumed his job was more than 2 weeks, then yeah, he should have gotten more than the two $600 payments. That program is administered by the New Jersey Department of Labor. We funded it in Congress, but it's the New Jersey DOL that administers it. We've had a lot of frustrations with them. We've taken up a lot of individual cases with them, and we'd be happy to look at your husband's case as well if you're willing to share that information with us after the call. And let's see what we can do about this. Again, I want to make sure every single one of my constituents gets every penny that they're entitled to under the laws that we have passed.
Thank you very much. Our next question comes from Lisa in Stewartsville. Lisa, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Congressman, for holding another town hall. I really appreciate it. I guess my question touches on something that you spoke about at your last town hall, and namely, I'm concerned that for the November elections, the Republicans may plan something in regards to the electoral college and misuse of the college or the electorate, and I'm wondering if anything is being done to make sure that our votes will all be secured and counted, and I guess that's my question.
Thanks, Lisa. And actually, before I get to that, Ivan, going back to the last questioner, if we can make it clear to everybody how to get in touch with us if they have an individual request like that, that would be great. I just want to make sure that that caller and any others knows how to do that. So at the appropriate moment, if you could announce that or share it.
Absolutely. Folks, get a pen handy, and we'll announce that information shortly.
Okay. So on the election issue, it's a concern that of course, I strongly share. This is not a partisan issue. This is the most fundamental right we have as Americans is to vote. And the right to vote is threatened in a lot of ways. There's voter suppression, there's gerrymandering in a lot of states. But most fundamentally right now, it's threatened by the coronavirus, which has made it unsafe for a lot of people to vote in person and really made it harder to organize elections because you need the poll workers, you need people manning polling stations, and there's just no way if we were to have an election in New Jersey today right now that we could have the number of polling stations that we normally do in a general election. And so the only sensible answer to that, and the answer that most states, whether they're led by Republican or Democratic leaders, have embraced, is to make it easier for folks to vote from home, from the safety of their homes. We just did that in New Jersey in our primary election. Now this is being politicized, unfortunately. The president, although he personally votes by mail and his family vote by mail, has decided to launch a campaign to try to discredit that means of casting our ballots. There are states that cast 100% of their ballots by mail. Colorado, Utah, Washington. And yet he's trying to convince people that this is somehow fraudulent or wrong. And I do worry that this is setting up an argument after November 3rd that whatever the outcome, however the American people actually vote, that somehow that outcome will not be legitimate. We all have to join together. It doesn't matter what party we are in defending this system of elections that we have and in insisting, number one, give everybody the right to vote safely. That's what we have tried to do in the House of Representatives. We've passed legislation to require the access to vote by mail in every state. We've provided a lot of money to states to try to shore up their elections, to make the transition, to make whatever changes are needed to ensure that voting is safer. And we're going to continue to do that. I'm going to say a lot of this is on the shoulders of our governors. They need to work together to come up with some common standards to protect the vote on November 3rd. We are going to, I hope, have hearings in the House of Representatives as well to shine a light on some of the shenanigans that could happen, so that we're prepared for them, and we can blow the whistle if we see anything that is wrong. This is huge priority and should be for everybody who cares about the integrity of our democracy, whichever side you're on in our political divide. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much. Folks, just a reminder that we've got operators standing by to take down your email address. Just hit 7. And we're going to go ahead and take our next question. Mary Lou from Warren is up. Mary Lou, go ahead with your question.
Good evening, Congressman, and thank you very much for holding this phone town hall. It's greatly appreciated. I'm a small business owner in Warren, New Jersey, and the NJEDA did a grant program for small businesses that met certain criteria, and they entered into a phase 2 of that, and we were supposed to have some answers. It says within 5 days. Yet, other than knowing that the application is being considered, and this is since June, nothing else has come about. I was wondering if you knew anything about that grant program.
Thanks, Mary Lou. So I know about the grant program, but it is a state program, not a federal program. So I don't know as much about it as some of the stuff that we have done from the federal level to help small businesses. We are happy to pass along that question to the state government. So again, if you're willing to leave us your information and give us permission to do that, we'd be happy to take that request to them. In the meantime, can I ask you, did you apply for a PPP loan?
I was very fortunate in being one of the first people early on that was able to get it, but via a credit union. Wells Fargo would not work with me at all, and they were my business bank.
Yep.
But I did get assistance with a local credit union, and they were very helpful. The challenge that I had with the PPP is my 8 weeks, I think I was at like week 6 when the rules changed and you could have a longer time period to use the monies. But by that time, I would assume business owners that had the program in place, you had worked it out for 8 weeks, so you couldn't then restructure it. You couldn't turn around and tell employees, well, guess what, I'm going to pay you less now.
Right.
So the extension didn't help, and of course now the 8 weeks ended and now somewhat floundering to figure out how to stay afloat while we all go through this recovery phase.
Right. We would be happy to talk to you about your options, and if it's a state program, we're not as directly involved, but again, we can certainly figure out how to help you get that information. In the meantime, if you got the PPP loan, the next step is to try to get it forgiven, which was the whole point. That's the real benefit. And again, I think, my team would be happy to advise you on that and to provide any help if you run into any trouble.
All right, Congressman, we've got our next caller coming up. We've got a lot of questions in the queue. We appreciate everyone participating. Just a note, here's the phone number if you'd like to give the Congressman's office a call. The district office, their phone number is area code 908-547-3307. You can also visit the Congressman's website, which is malinowski.house.gov, and click on the casework request and submit something there. And we'll announce that number again later on in the call. Up next, we're going to take Barbara. She's calling in from Watchung. And go ahead, Barbara, with your question.
Thank you for taking my call, Congressman. I appreciate what you're doing. I was getting the pandemic benefit check, and my last check was on June 22nd, and then after that, it stopped. I was wondering if the pandemic benefits are still available.
So was that the $1,200 stimulus check or the unemployment insurance?
Unemployment insurance.
Unemployment insurance. So yes, that should still be available if you are still out of work. That program, including the $600 weekly enhancement, runs out at the end of July, but we're not at the end of July yet. So I think that's a case I would encourage you to ask us to look into for you.
Because when I report on my reporting date to unemployment on the computer, they tell me that they can't access the pandemic benefits. I have to call a block of 4 numbers. I call a block of 4 numbers. They don't answer the phone.
Yeah, well, welcome to our world. These are the struggles we've had with the New Jersey Department of Labor. To be fair to them, they were overwhelmed because we went from very little unemployment to massive unemployment overnight. It's taking them several weeks to resolve cases that we bring to their attention. But we are resolving them one person at a time. And the good news is that even if you have to wait longer than you should, in the end, you get what you're entitled to, even if you get it late. So, it's not something you and I will be able to resolve right now on the phone, but if you're willing to speak to one of my staff members and give them the details of your situation, then they may be able to help. And don't worry, we will call you back. That's the difference between my office and the Department of Labor. You will get a call back. It may take a day or two, but we'll get to you.
All right. Our next caller is Brian from Mount Laurel. Go ahead, Brian, with your question.
Hi, Congressman. First of all, I really appreciate this town hall. It's wonderful that we get to have this interface with you. I was wondering, from a federal standpoint, what's being done to kind of protect the USPS and keep them operational? Because I know they're really important, not only for our vote-by-mail system, which is critical at this time, but also even for that just last mile of getting packages and letters to where we want them to go to our loved ones and other businesses.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct, and we've been even more dependent on the post office the last few months than we normally are, of course, because we've been staying at home and we've relied on delivery. So the post office is in financial trouble through no fault of the post office. That's important to remember. The post office does not lose money. It actually makes a little money off of its mail delivery service. It's in trouble because of a law that Congress passed in the 2000s that requires it to pre-fund pensions for all of its employees 50 years in advance, something that no major corporation in America does. And so they've been suffering under the weight of that obligation. We tried to fix that in the HEROES Act, which is the big bill that passed the House and is now pending before the Senate. It's part of the negotiation that we are undertaking with Senator McConnell in the Senate right now. It's hard for me to believe that at the end of the day, senators will want to allow the post office to go under. This is something else that's been politicized right now for reasons that are a little bit strange and mysterious. But, you know, I would say particularly senators who represent rural states should understand from their constituents just how important the post office is. FedEx and all these other private companies are not going to be delivering stuff, as you said, that last mile to folks on country roads in rural Oklahoma and South Dakota, not to mention rural parts of New Jersey that I represent. So this should be bipartisan in the Congress, and I hope that we can get it done in shaping the next COVID-19 package.
Thank you very much, Congressman. Folks, if you have a question, you can hit 0. We've got plenty in the queue. I don't think we'll be able to get to all of your questions this evening, but we will get to as many as we can. We just want to remind you, though, that if you do stay on the call, you can leave a voicemail at the end of this call for questions. But we do have operators standing by who can help you with your email address, so hit 7 if you'd like to do that. Up next is Teresa calling in from Chester. Teresa, go ahead.
Hi, Congressman Malinowski. I don't know if you remember me. I spoke to you on the Brian Lehrer show. And I just want to say that you're...
I do.
Okay. I just want to thank you that your team, Philip and John, were very helpful, and Philip constantly contacts me and stays in contact with me to try and help me, even though it's like walking up Mount Everest with a bag of coal on my back. But in any case, my question for you this evening is that I own a restaurant, a small restaurant in Chester, which I've said before, and I opened that restaurant when I was 38. That was 30 years ago. I have a great business. I've worked hard, sacrificed a lot, and I'm watching everything I've worked for evaporate. I don't know what to do. I've used all the PPP money because we were only allowed to claim enough for 2 months, and that's gone. And I'm terrified. I'm terrified because what do I do now? I mean, Governor Murphy said we could have indoor seating, then suddenly took it away because of the bad behavior of the bars. If the bars are the problem, then close the bars down. But don't penalize all the restaurants. There's 2 big restaurants in Chester have already closed for good. And if I lose my restaurant, I lose everything. I have no form of income. I lost all my savings during the recession. I lost my home in the recession. I just got back on my feet. And I need to know, when are we going to be able to seat people in our restaurants again? If we don't, I'm going to lose my restaurant. Today was horrendous. We had people sitting outside under a tent that was lifting off the ground. The rain was gushing down, pouring down under their feet. This is insanity. This is not right. And I need some answers, because I tell you something now, I'm getting really scared.
I can't blame you. First of all, thank you again for reaching out. I'm glad that my team was able to help a little bit. I know it's not enough yet. On the closing of the restaurants, opening up indoor dining, that is a really tough call that the governor has to make. And this is not any comfort to you, but it's not just behavior in our state, but behavior of people in other states, and the real risk that we face of this thing coming back and hitting us even harder. We want the schools to open in the fall, and for that to happen, we're going to have to continue to make tough choices elsewhere. That's, I know, the governor's thinking. I see my job, my responsibility in all of this, because thankfully I don't have to make that life or death decision. My responsibility is that if we are asking people to stay closed, to make these sacrifices, that we have the resources for them to survive whatever period of time we ask you to do that. You're not the first caller tonight, obviously, who's pointed out that the PPP wasn't enough. It got us through 8 weeks, maybe a little more for some people. But if restaurants are being asked to make sacrifices longer, we need something beyond PPP. Now, there are some of these New Jersey grant programs, and if you haven't applied for the New Jersey EDA grant that we were discussing before, that could help a little bit. I can tell you that I'm also a co-sponsor and very strong backer of a new bill that we've just introduced that is just for independent restaurants, because I think it's pretty clear right now that we're not reopening every sector of the economy at the same speed, at the same time. We closed them at the same time, but we're not reopening them at the same time. So this bill is, again, just for independent restaurants. It provides stabilization, recoupment of lost revenue through at least the end of the year. And it's got dozens and dozens of co-sponsors in the House of Representatives. So while I cannot promise you that it will pass, I can promise you that it's being taken seriously, that it's something that is part of the conversation, and I'm going to fight like heck to try to make sure that something like that is done in the next coronavirus relief package. If our governor is telling you to do this, then the least I can do is to try to make sure we have the resources to help you survive. I told you I wanted to sit down and have a meal at your restaurant when all this is through, so I have a personal stake in trying to help you get to that point.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next question comes from Sam in Greenbrook. Sam, go ahead with your question.
Hello, Congressman. Can I be heard?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, thank you. I want to thank you for your service. I helped work for you, and I don't regret it at all. Thanks very much. I'm calling on behalf of my sister. I'm not in Greenbrook. My sister is. Two of the state's developmental centers where the very most vulnerable New Jerseyans who have profound and severe intellectual disabilities live are in your district. We fight and fight and fight the uphill battle for these most vulnerable people who only have us as their advocates, nobody else. As this, I guess it's the fourth or fifth coronavirus relief bill gets worked on over the next few weeks, we desperately need to get things in that bill that will help the most vulnerable people, not only in your district but all over the country, the severely disabled folks. They are at higher risk of getting infected with this virus, and they are at higher risk for adverse outcomes, including death. How do we go about fighting for and getting into this bill what they so desperately need?
Yeah. So there are resources in the HEROES Act for schools, special education, that would help meet exactly this need. But I'll tell you what I think is actually the most important thing, and I mentioned this in my opening remarks, and that is that we provide that relief to our state, county, and municipal governments. That relief is not designated for any particular purpose, including this purpose. It's designated to help our local and state governments make up for lost revenue due to the coronavirus. But that's just essential because much of the support that you're talking about that enables these services to be provided to our citizens is funded at the state, county, and local level. And so if revenues are down as we expect, and the state makes huge budget cuts, and every single municipality makes huge budget cuts, guess what's going to get axed? They have to at least keep the police department functioning. They have a legal obligation to fund the schools. It is going to be programs for people with special needs that unfortunately get on the chopping block. And so I think the most important thing I can do on this issue, and a lot of others, is to fight for that state and local government relief. We've been very, very clear with Senator McConnell. He has some priorities that he wants to get in the next bill. We're only going to talk about his priorities if he's willing to do this.
Thank you very much, Congressman. Our next question is one that I will read. Someone asked to read it. And the question is, there was an infrastructure bill that passed the House. Will the Senate take it up?
Great question. So first of all, here's what's in the infrastructure bill. We desperately need to invest in our transportation infrastructure in this country, in our roads, our tunnels, our bridges, so much of which is in poor repair in New Jersey and around the country. We need to invest in our public water resources. We need to invest in broadband for parts of our country that are not covered. My goodness, we've learned the importance of high-speed internet with our kids home these last few weeks, and there are places, even in my congressional district, where that's difficult. This bill does all of the above. It is particularly useful for New Jersey because it has money in it that we will be able to use to complete the Gateway project to improve that train link between New Jersey and New York, to build that tunnel that we need under the Hudson River. So it is a really, really, really good bill. And by the way, we do all of this in a way that emphasizes clean energy and the transition that our country needs to make to relying more on clean energy than on fossil fuels, so that we lead the world in that economic transformation. Your good question was, will the Senate take this up? And I never know what the Senate will take up. But I do know that there are a lot of members of the Senate, including Republican members, who've also said we need an infrastructure bill. And I know that President Trump has said intermittently that he would like to do a very big infrastructure bill. Well, we just passed one, and we don't expect him or the Senate to embrace every single detail of the bill that we passed. What we do expect is that we sit down and negotiate and find that common ground. That's the way Washington is supposed to work. The House passes a bill, the Senate passes a different bill, and then we come together and try to split the difference. I'm hopeful that the president will see that it's in his political interest in this election year to try to get something done on infrastructure, something that will create jobs in this country. That'll be a political win for all of us, including for him, and I'm happy to have him share in that if it helps us back home. So that's where we are. We put this on the table. We are hoping that everybody else comes to the table and that we find a compromise that gives everybody at least a little bit of what they think is important. And it is possible this year, not guaranteed, but it is possible.
Thank you very much, Congressman. Folks, we have operators standing by who can take your email address. They've got to all the ones so far, so hit 7 on your keypad, and you can get the latest. There's going to be a lot of developments over the next couple of months, and you'll want to stay informed, so please hit 7. Our next call comes from Joanne in Cranford. Joanne, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Joan from Cranford. I want to thank you very much for all your services. You are heads and shoulders above a lot of other politicians, and we know that you listen to us, and that's very much appreciated. I'm a member of the Volunteer First Aid Squad, and when we first started to get an inkling of what was developing, we went out to try to get a lot of equipment, PPEs, and we were competing against FEMA, and it was the price was just skyrocketing. And Trump last week said that he has literally thousands of ventilators and PPE. Can Congress put some pressure on him to release it to all the hospitals and all of the emergency people that are helping, in this dire situation? And, it's not just that, it's everything. I could go on forever. There's so many different issues, with him. I think that he's extremely inept. I'm sorry to say it, but I think somebody should be in charge. And all the 50 states should just close for 2 weeks, suffer a little bit, and then we'll be healthier and we'll be able to go to the schools and go to the games and do everything and go to the restaurants, which, I used to frequent, and, it's a downer on me. So appreciate whatever you could do to put pressure on releasing everything and trying to get, these stubborn people to and realize how serious this predicament is. We're up to 134,000 deaths so far. And we went to 6, we were called on 6, just within 12 hours. So it's not funny anymore, And
no, it is not. No, it isn't. Well, thank you, Joan. And first of all, thank you for being a volunteer. I hope that more of our fellow Americans right now appreciate people like you for giving that service to your community. And I hope more of us understand how hard it is. I haven't walked in the shoes of a firefighter or a paramedic, but the stories that I have heard in the last few months of these wonderful, brave folks who are responding every single day to calls for help. And at the height of this crisis, every single day, they were comforting the relatives, the loved ones of good people who were dying to coronavirus. What they went through, what these folks go through, and many of them are volunteers, many of them are professional but paid almost nothing to do some of the hardest jobs in America. It's something we all need to keep in mind going forward, to value that service, to value that work. So thank you. On PPE, you're absolutely right. It's ridiculous that a local rescue squad or municipality or even hospital should have to compete with FEMA or with anybody else around the country for masks and gowns or anything else that they need. So what we've been desperately pleading with the president to do is to take charge of this, to have a single entity, the federal government, coordinate the distribution and production of PPE, of protective equipment, for everyone who needs it around the country. He's refused to do that. He doesn't want the responsibility. So, Plan B has been the Congress provides money, and we have done a lot of that. We've been successful there to help the states take charge. So instead of one person in charge, we got 50 states in charge. That's still better than nothing, and New Jersey has done a very good job for all of us. Unfortunately, we've seen now this spike in other states. We have more cases than anyone in the world every single day right now, and that's put more pressure on the system. We're doing okay in New Jersey still, but there's a shortage of masks. There's a shortage of gowns and gloves in a lot of states right now, and that will eventually be a problem for us as well because we're competing with them. It's amazing to me that 4 months into this, we do not have N95 masks for every single American. We produce enough cans of soda in America to supply every American with 3 cans of Coke every single day. We can do that. We should be able to supply people with this kind of equipment, which is simple to make. And, all I can say is we will continue to push the president to do it. We'll continue to provide the resources for the states to do it. And I hope we all learn the lesson of this for the next time this happens.
Our next question comes from Lambertville. This is Jeannie. Go ahead with your question, please.
Good evening, Congressman. Thank you so much for everything you're doing. And there is so much to do as I'm listening to all your callers, and there's so much to be worried about. And like everyone else on this call tonight, I am very worried about the coronavirus and everything that entails. But I also want to bring up another worry, and that is about another very feared disease in this country with no cure, which is Alzheimer's. And as you know, I talk about this quite often with you. Research is advancing, and we absolutely need to keep it going because we're finally starting to make some breakthroughs in this terrible disease with no treatment, no prevention, no cure, as I said. There's at least 190,000 in New Jersey alone who are diagnosed with it, and there's almost 500,000 family caregivers who are also losing their jobs because they have to take care of their family and also sometimes getting ill just from the stress of it. So like them, I need to know if you think that we'll be able to continue funding research in the middle of all this. That the NIH researchers have been asking for as we move towards the fiscal year of 2021. I would love to have your read on that.
Thanks, Jeannie. And I'm pretty confident that the answer is yes on funding research and funding the National Institutes of Health. One of our important tasks in the House in the next month or so will be to pass our appropriations bills, our spending bills for the next fiscal year. We've been pretty responsible in the House. We've been getting them done on time. And I have, as you know, been a strong and very vocal proponent within that process of funding NIH, increasing funding for Alzheimer's research and research into other diseases. And there is a lot of support on both sides of the aisle for that. And I'm pretty confident that we will do it. The federal government is spending a lot of money right now. Where I'm mostly worried is, as I said before, state, county, and local level, because our state and municipal governments have to balance their budget. So if the revenue's not coming in, they got to cut or raise our property taxes, which none of us want to see happen. And as we were discussing earlier, so many of the basic services that touch our lives are supported by our state and municipal governments. So that's why I'm going to fight as hard as I can to get the relief that we need.
Thanks, Congressman. This is Gene calling in from Flemington. Gene, you're up.
Hi, Congressman. My question was about the defund the police movement and what your thoughts are on that. Do you think it's a viable way to fight racism or to make race relations better in our country?
No, not really. What I think we need to be doing, what we need to be focusing on in the wake of George Floyd's murder in Minnesota and I think absolutely systemic problems that pointed to, is to try to increase the trust between our local police departments and the communities they serve. Civilians need to be safer. Civilians need to trust that when they call the police, they are calling somebody who's going to protect them, and that your race has nothing to do with how you are treated by the police. And the police will be safer when they have that trust as well. And so what we have done in the House of Representatives is to pass a bill, which I think is a pretty darn good bill, to have much more clear standards for when and how police departments use force, to improve training, to provide support for communities that are looking to find new ways of building trust between police and the people that they serve, to try to limit the transfer of military equipment, armored personnel carriers, and heavy weapons to police departments, because we want our police to look like police. We don't want them to look like they're the 82nd Airborne Division parachuting into our communities. So that's all stuff that I support. But I don't agree personally with the defund the police slogan, because I don't think it captures any of that, and because I think actually if we want really good policing, if we want improved policing in our country, we're not going to get it if we have fewer police officers patrolling. If we have fewer police officers with less support, we're going to have a hard time recruiting really good people, number one, to join our police departments. And we're going to have less of the community presence, the community involvement by our police that I think engenders that trust that I mentioned. I've talked to a lot of police chiefs in our district over the last few weeks, including in Flemington. Police chief in Flemington marched along with the demonstrators on that day when there was a protest against police violence. It was a really stand-up thing that he did. And almost every police chief I speak to agrees with the general principles that I just outlined. They know there's a problem. They know that there needs to be reform. We're working with them to do this. But this is not about reducing support for police. It's about increasing trust in policing.
Thank you, Congressman. Folks, this is your last chance to submit your email address. We've got operators standing by, so just hit 7 on your keypad. It'll just take about 30 seconds, and you'll get updates from the Congressman's office. Our next question is going to come also from Flemington. This is Mohammed. And go ahead, Mohammed.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, Congressman, and hello to the wider audience listening. Thank you very much, first and foremost, for holding a town hall like this. I've never participated in anything like it, and I think it's a great way to connect with your constituents. I have some comments followed by a question that's probably a bit different than anything you've heard before from the folks in Hunterdon County. So I'm a 29-year-old first-generation Muslim Egyptian American, born and raised in Flemington, and I also happen to be a staunch Trump supporter. Unfortunately, one issue I strongly disagreed with President Trump on during the 2016 election and even up to today was the careless and hateful rhetoric he was spreading against Islam and Muslims. So as a proud Muslim American and lifelong Hunterdon County resident who loves this country, one thing I was very disappointed in from both Republicans and Democrats alike was the lack of any strong, meaningful stance taken against the statements that President Trump and some of the more radical folks he surrounded himself with were and still continue to make. So as my representative, how do you propose you and the other sensible folks in Washington and in the media prevent the same level of hateful rhetoric occurring in 2020 that occurred in 2016? Because honestly, it had gotten so bad leading up to the previous election that I had a truly legitimate fear of violence against myself, my family, my friends, and my loved ones.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you for your question. Thank you for your love of our country. As you may know, I'm an immigrant to America. I was born in Poland, came here when I was 6 years old. And the first time I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution, I was 10 years old when I was sworn in to be a citizen of the United States. And I believe so strongly that our great advantage in the world is that we are the only big country where anybody can be one of us. Anybody can be an American, whatever your faith, wherever you were born, whatever you look like, so long as you embrace the basic principles of our country and play by the rules. And we attract the best people because of that. The best people from around the world who contribute their talent and their energy and their belief in us, because immigrants and the children of immigrants believe in America as much or even more intensely than anybody else. So in answer to your question directly, yeah, I share your concern, as you can imagine. I think we're seeing more of this as the election comes closer. We're seeing a lot of divisive rhetoric that is designed to play on people's fears of others who are different from us, whether they are different racially or different religiously. I've spoken out against that. With regard to President Trump, you may recall an incident last year when he demanded that some of the members of Congress who've been pains in his behind, who look like they are immigrants. I think you know who I'm referring to, including 2 Muslim American members of Congress. And he said that they should, quote, go home to their countries, even though, like you, they were born in the United States of America. I led the House in passing a resolution condemning that statement, condemning the use of that kind of racially charged rhetoric at the highest levels of our country. And the House voted on it and passed that resolution. So we spoke up, and I think that's what we all have to do. When we see something that crosses the line, whether it's coming from a member of our party or another party, we've got to stand up and say, that's wrong. That's not who we are as Americans. And I promise you, I will continue to do that. Again, whether it's coming from someone in my party or the other party, does not matter. We have no place for that kind of rhetoric in America.
Thank you very much, Congressman Malinowski. We are unfortunately at our allotted time for this evening. I will turn it over to you, Congressman, in just a moment to bring us to the finish line and end the call. But I do want to just remind folks on the call, if you have a question that wasn't answered, or if you have a comment to share, please just stay on the line till the end of the call, and you can leave a voicemail that the Congressman's office can receive. We also strongly encourage you to visit malinowski.house.gov. That's the Congressman's website. And request a casework file, and his team and the Congressman's team can file up with you there. A lot of great resources there, so please visit that website. Thank you very much, Congressman, and we'll turn it over to you to bring us to the finish line, please.
Thank you so much. And I think it's correct that if folks stay on for the voicemail, they can also leave their information for us to contact them on a specific issue like those unemployment cases that we discussed. So please do stay on the line if you want us to reach out to you about that, or you can visit the website or call our district office, as you heard before. Again, I just want to, excuse me, I just want to say thank you to everybody who has joined us, to everybody who took the time to ask a great set of questions. I hope it's helpful to you to hear directly from me, but just as important, it's helpful to me to hear directly from you, because that's what enables me to shape my priorities in Congress. I need to be able to take your stories to my colleagues in the House, to take your needs to my colleagues to the House, and that's what allows me to do my job as best as I can, and I'm going to keep working as hard as I can, particularly at this moment of crisis. So with that, thank you again. We'll do this again, I hope soon, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with you at the earliest possible opportunity. Good night, everybody. Have wonderful weekends and stay healthy and safe.